Hello everyone. For this week's tutorial, I would like to be discussing the two modulation effects, tremolo and vibrato, and how to apply them in Audacity. Or if you are using a mobile, something like WavePad. Vibrato and tremolo refer to the modulation in pitch and volume respectively, and modulation refers to applying an extra sound wave on top of your existing recording to vary something in the sound wave. Sadly, Audacity does not have a vibrato effect, so you would manually or physically have to move the pitch up and down on a sound, which you would not be able to do with percussion instruments, but you could feasibly do with string or wind instruments, including your voice. For string instruments, by rapidly adjusting the tension as you play, and for wind instruments, by rapidly opening and closing the airway as you play, either through the holes on top if you use something like a flute, or through the valves if you use something like a trumpet or trombone. So for example, you can change vibrato in your voice by doing something like this, like this. And you could also try to make the vibrato more rapid by doing something like this. However, even though Audacity does not have a vibrato electronic effect, so you would have to physically create vibrato, WavePad does, and it will allow you to set the depth and frequency. The depth refers to how strongly the effect is pronounced. So a depth of 0 means no effect applied. A depth of 5 means the effect is applied very subtly. And a depth of 100% means the effect is applied at its maximum amplitude. The frequency of the effect refers to how many times the effect is applied over the sound. So for example, my first example of the voice would have a lower frequency than my second example because I vibrate my voice more slowly the first time. Tremolo, however, is supported in both WavePad and Audacity. And once you have made your recording, you click Effect, Tremolo. And you will see a dialog box with waveform type, starting phase, wet level, and frequency, where wet level means the same thing as the depth, so it's how strongly the tremolo is applied. Frequency works the same as in vibrato and refers to how many times per second the effect is applied. So in this case, how many times per second the volume fluctuates. And waveform type and starting phase are two new things that were not in WavePad, but simply refer to how the wave works that you blend your recording with. And the starting phase refers to the point in the sound wave that you start at. So 0 means you start at the very beginning. 180 means you start at midway through. And negative 180 means you start at midway through as well, just the other way around. And any degree in between will start closer to the end or midpoint depending on which number it is closer to. So 45 would be closer to the end and beginning points, whereas 135 would be closer to the midpoints. If you remember from the second sound music production video about how the basic waveforms worked, then you may be able to guess that the sine wave would have the most smoothest fluctuations in volume.
And once you have made your recording,
the square wave would have the most sudden and harsh sounding.
and once you have made your recording,
The sawtooth and inverse sawtooth would have slight transitions but still mostly be harsh.
and once you have made your recording,
And the triangle wave would be the smoothest transition besides the sine wave, but would still sound slightly harsh because of how the transitions are linear or spike-shaped rather than 100% smooth like the sine waves. Right now, I have the frequency set to modulate 100 times per second, so the differences are not immediately obvious. But they should become more obvious once I set it to a very low frequency like 4. Sine wave.
and once you have made your recording,
Notice the fluctuations and how they are very smooth. Square wave.
and once you have made your recording,
Notice how it doesn't sound like fluctuations, but instead big jumps in volume. Sawtooth.
and once you have made your recording,
Notice how there is a fluctuation at one part and then a jump at another. Inverse sawtooth.
and once you have made your recording,
Notice how the fluctuation is in the opposite direction from the regular sawtooth, i.e., it goes down rather than up. And finally, triangle.
and once you have made your recording,
Notice how it fluctuates like sine, but the fluctuations are a little more sudden sounding and not as smooth sounding as the sine. Join me in next week's tutorial, where I discuss time-based effects, with the most basic being repetition, echo being another one, and then finally delay and reverb being the most sophisticated but also the most well-known and popular ones. I will also teach pulse stretch and sliding stretch, which works very similar to changing tempo or speed, but allows you to get a nice stretched out effect that would be hard to get with the normal speed and tempo change options. Don't forget to subscribe if you found this video informative, and make sure to see other tutorial videos, and follow me on either Facebook or Twitter for more content.